Welcome to the last session of my 5-part series about real estate investments. And that's whether you're a renter buying your first home, or you already own a home and you're looking to pull equity out, or buy a new home and convert your current home into an investment. So as a reminder, all of my prior sessions can be seen on Stacy Loves Real Estate, my YouTube channel. And today we'll be talking about, I'll give you an overview of the first 4 sessions, and I'll go over a 1031 tax-deferred exchange and also the tax abatements ins and outs. And then I will summarize what Carl Fisher from Camaplan last night taught us about self-directed IRAs. So if you're interested in hearing more about what he had to say than I provide today, feel free to go look for the Tuesday night version of this webinar on my YouTube channel, Stacy Loves Real Estate. And then of course, we'll go through some announcements at the end. All right, so number 1, what are we saving for? Having a really important goal is always the way that it makes it easier to stick to a plan. If you know what you're trying to achieve, it's always easier to overcome obstacles or inconveniences along the way. Because if your goal is important enough, like saving for retirement or paying for your kids' college, then looking for a home, analyzing a home, getting a tenant, it makes it that much easier when you have an end goal. I also talked about my experience as a landlord over the past 18 years and my strategy for picking homes. We also talked about why real estate and the amazing benefits that come with real estate and what makes it different from stocks. And we had Chris Coyne from GCA Insurance talking about how to use insurance to mitigate your risk. In session 2, we discussed 3 strategies to build your portfolio. So number 1, if you're a renter, you want to buy a home, and that will help you get the $1.2 million advantage over 30 years. And basically what that means is that you'll be building up, even with a $1,000 monthly payment, you'll be building up an asset that's worth almost $650,000 after 30 years versus paying $570,000 in rent over that same time frame. So that puts you at a $1.2 million advantage over somebody who stayed as a renter their whole life. And then of course, once you're an owner, you have the opportunity, if you have equity built up into the home, to take out that equity and buy an investment property. Or you can, if that home no longer suits your family's needs, you can buy a new primary home and convert that one into a rental. We talked about the 6 easy steps for building wealth in real estate. And number 1 was determining your purchasing power. So I can help you do that if you give me a few bits of information, which we'll discuss later in the session. Then we'll analyze areas and property types that will fit your budget. We'll visit and analyze these properties. We'll make an offer, and then go through the inspection and other contingencies, as well as leasing out whichever property needs to be leased out. And then, of course, we had Center City Mortgage with us, who explained, about different types of investment options. And I also brought to the table some HELOC ideas that usually your local bank can do. Session 3, I brought on JG Real Estate, Jared Gruber. They're my personal property management company. After about 14 years of being a landlord, I decided, even though I'm in the day-to-day business of real estate, I realized that I needed a professional manager. And I always say to anybody who asks, they take care of my properties better than I can, obviously with oversight, but they are so on top of their game, making sure that I don't have vacancies, my properties are kept up, that I highly recommend sticking to your day job and let a professional manage your properties. And then I give you my top tips from experience, my 18 years experience as a landlord. And then in session 4, we discussed 2 ways of analyzing investment properties. One is a cap rate, and that is if you're going to keep a property and rent it. A cap rate is basically the interest rate you're earning on the property, and because it's a tangible asset, there are other considerations that you want to factor in. We also discussed after renovation value. So if you bought a property for $100,000 and you needed to put $100,000 in, well, maybe you need to sell it for $350 in order to get your profit goal out of it and pay all your costs. So ARV, after renovated value, we discussed in session 4, as well as the attorney that I like to recommend, Alan Nachumson. He discussed buying in an LLC versus your own name, and also the red flags for new construction and buying a condo. I always say when you're buying new construction or a condo, hire an attorney. There are hundreds of extra documents and things that need to be followed up with outside of the regular sales process that an attorney will help you to protect your wallet. All right, so today's session, I wanted to introduce you to 1031 tax-deferred exchanges. So they're also known as the Starker loophole, Starker exchanges, like-kind exchanges, or just 1031 exchanges. So it's just the section of the IRS tax code. So whenever you sell a property that you've made money on, the government is going to tax your profits, otherwise known as the capital gains, at a rate of 15 or 20%, depending on, as I understand it, your tax rate. So for example, if you made $100,000 on a rental property when you sold it, then you're going to pay, let's say, $15,000 of that $100,000 profit to the government. The government created the 1031 loophole or 1031 exchange in order for you to roll that money, that $100,000, back into a new, bigger property. So they said, we're not going to tax you right now on your profit if you decide to reinvest it into bigger real estate. So if you do take money out though, let's say you were buying a new property and you only needed $80,000 for the new purchase, and you took $20,000 cash out. Well, that $20,000 will be taxed. It's called boot or booty. It'll be taxed at that 15 or 20% capital gains rate. So just be aware of that. Also, be aware that you will need money when you make a purchase for the deposits, the appraisal, and the inspections. So if you haven't sold, the property yet, or even if you have sold the property and you are in the process of buying the new property, you won't have access to the cash unless you take it out. So ideally, you have other funds set aside to pay for appraisals, inspections, deposit, and the like in advance of closing. And then also reverse exchanges are really useful if, let's say, in the course of you're just looking around or I come to you and say, hey, here's a great property. And you're like, oh, wow, I need to buy that. What can I sell in order to get that property? You can actually buy the new property or the replacement property before you sell the property that you will apply the exchange to. So you just need to follow a certain set of rules, which we'll go over. But my understanding is that you will need the money upfront to buy the new property because you haven't yet sold the old property. And my understanding is that you end up reimbursing yourself wherever you got that original money from when you use that tax-deferred exchange. All right, so it's very important that you follow the timeline provided by the IRS to do the 1031 exchange. Number one, you're going to use a qualified exchange accommodation arrangement with a qualified intermediary. Usually at a cost less than $1,000. 1031exchange.com is a website that can help you out with a local company. It also must be like kind. So you must buy real estate when you sell real estate. Because you can do a like kind or 1031 exchange with boats, with art, with other things that are considered investments, cattle. And you must identify the replacement property within 45 days of the sale of the first property. So you go to settlement, you have 45 days to identify properties that meet the requirements. And then you must acquire any number of those properties that meet the rule that the new property must be equal price or greater in equity and debt than the first property. You need to settle on those within 180 days. So since those are concurrent, you have 45 days to identify and then another 135 days to settle. All right. So if there are any questions, of course, I'm happy to answer them. And now we'll dive into the tax abatement. So it's first important to understand City of Philadelphia tax basics to understand how the abatement works. So number one, your taxes are the assessed value of the property times the tax rate. And both of those can increase and your taxes will go up. City Council establishes the tax rate, and then the Office of the Property Assessor actually assesses each property. And the way it works is that the City Council takes their budget and says, across the property values, we need to collect X number of taxes, and from there they figure out what the tax rate needs to be. Our current tax rate is just shy of 1.4%. So if you get a tax abatement, you are essentially freezing the assessed value of the property. and your taxes will only be based on the pre-improved assessed value, so presumably the land, and we'll go over that in another slide. So it's also important to note that you can apply for a tax abatement on completely new construction, or if you're doing a major renovation. So for example, if you buy a property for $200,000 and you put in $100,000, then you can apply for the tax abatement on the additional $100,000 improvement. My only concern about that and caution to you is that, let's say that property is now worth $350,000. Well, that could trigger the city to reassess your property at the $350,000, and now you just tacked on another $50,000 worth of assessed value, and that added to your taxes about $700 that year. So, you know, take it for what it's worth and consider whether or not you want to get a tax abatement on the improvements. All right. All right, so here's a tax abatement example for new construction. So land was purchased for and assessed at $50,000. A new home was built and sold to a buyer for $450,000. So the improvements would be assessed at $400,000 for a total assessed value of $450,000. With the abatement, the annual taxes would be $50,000 times the 1.3998, which is about $700 a year. Now, without the abatement, the annual taxes would be $6,300. So that's $450,000, the total assessed value, times that 1.998 in taxes. So as you can see, that over 10 years is a $56,000 difference, assuming that the tax rate stays the same, which it probably won't. So at minimum, the buyer of a new construction property with this tax abatement example is saving over $56,000 over the life of the loan, or the life of that tax abatement, excuse me. Now, if the tax rate goes up to 2%, the house with the abatement is going to go up to $1,000 a year, because the abatement is not no taxes, it's just the frozen assessed value. So it would now be the $100,000, or excuse me, $50,000 times 0.2 or 0.02. So $1,000 a year. Now the abatement, the property without the tax abatement, now their taxes are going to be $9,000, because it'll be 2% times $450,000. So you can see that is a huge difference having the abatement versus not having the abatement. I alluded to earlier that there are two kinds of tax abatements in Philadelphia, and they each have their own application rules. So if you are building a new construction property or buying one from a builder, you want to make sure that they applied for the tax abatement within 60 days of pulling the permit. And also that the builder got a 30-month builder's abatement, so that while they're constructing the property, the tax assessed value did not go up. Now, if you were doing a major renovation, you would actually have till the end of the calendar year. So that means that if you pulled the permits on December 1st, you'd only have 30 days essentially to apply for the tax abatement. But if you pulled your permit, let's say February 1st, you'd have 11 months to file for that tax abatement. Now, if you're a buyer of a property with a tax abatement that's promised, then you'll get a certificate to commence the abatement at closing. And then we recommend to physically go down to the City Hall Municipal Services Building to have them stamp that they received your commencement certificate to commence the abatement. That way you know it's in place for that next tax year. So the next steps to your next property would be to determine your purchasing power, which we'll do together. Then next, we'll identify properties and areas that fit your budget and your needs. We'll visit and analyze the properties, make an offer, do our inspections, and then lease out whichever property needs to be leased out. Of course, if you're buying your first home, we don't need to lease anything out, but maybe you need to give your landlord notice. So in order to take that next step, what I ask you to do is just email me, stacy@phillyliving.com, your primary address, how much you owe, what your monthly payment is, including principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and mortgage insurance, and if you have any other cash assets that you'd be using for the purchase. All right, so I'm going to summarize what Carl Fisher from Camaplan talked about last night as far as self-directed IRAs. So if you think about your regular IRA, there are many retirement type accounts. Traditionally, we think of them as investing in the stock market, bonds, mutual funds, and all sorts of fancy investment vehicles that they do up on Wall Street. So a self-directed IRA is simply you saying to your IRA, with Camaplan actually functions as that entity that shields you from, that protects you in this process, kind of like the qualified intermediary protects you in the 1031 exchange. CamaPlan acts as the manager of your IRA. And you're essentially saying to the manager of your IRA, hey, here's my retirement funds, go invest it in real estate. And you're actually doing all the work behind the scenes to find the property, buy the property, etc. But what you're doing is you're converting your retirement funds from Wall Street, you're converting that into real estate portfolio. And we're going to look at this. So the tax savings versus the tax-free Roth. So there's a traditional Roth or a traditional IRA and then a Roth IRA. So the traditional IRA, you're going to pay taxes on it when you take the money out. So this is basically showing you that if you start investing in this initial amount, this $36,000 or the $16,000, and then you pay taxes on the gains, at the end of 40 years, you might only end up with less than $300,000. But if you invest in a Roth IRA, you will pay the taxes at the current tax rate, and then it will grow tax-free. So then it'll grow to the $1 million. So imagine if the seed money that you put in grew to $1 million, and when you take it out, you only take out $300,000. But the taxes that you pay when you pay it up front is going to be vastly lower when you pay it up front, because you know today's tax rate, and then it's growing tax-free. And the cool thing is that if you ever need to take out something from your Roth IRA, you can take out whatever you've contributed without any penalty, because you've already paid the taxes on it. If you take out any of the interest that you've earned over time, you will pay some sort of penalty on that because you haven't yet paid taxes on that. All right, so the self-directed IRA, Carl's family has been doing real estate for a really long time, and they're super passionate about real estate because, like me, they've experienced the power of real estate as an investment versus what stocks have done in a similar amount of time. Plus, it's something that you can control. Dave Ramsey says, don't invest in something that you don't understand. And quite honestly, I really don't understand how Wall Street works, but I do understand that people need a place to live. I do understand how to evaluate and pick a property. I do understand that being a landlord is having a relationship with somebody, and the product over which we have a relationship is the house. So that is something easily understood. And what's cool is that he was talking about how you can pass this down generation to generation. And I would encourage you, if you have questions about that, listen to the live webinar from last night or call him directly, because he's more than happy to set up a consultation with you and your accountant to really understand if the self-directed IRA that invests in real estate is for you. A couple other things I wanted to mention about the IRA or self-directed IRA is that, first of all, it's only $50 to set up the plan. And they don't even charge you until you actually buy something to put into your self-directed IRA. And then to manage it year after year is about $150 to $200. So for what that does, that is such a nominal fee. It's practically doing it for you for free. The second thing is that the IRS doesn't want you to, there are limits to the amount that you can contribute to your IRA, no matter where it's being invested. So they do not want to see you as the buyer of real estate doing sweat equity, because that would be improving the value of the property, and that would give you an unfair advantage over other people who might be investing in other vehicles, but they can't contribute sweat equity. So you want to think to yourself that you want to have an arm's length interaction with the day-to-day management of the property to make sure that you protect your investment in that. So again, having a property manager, they basically they'll advertise for the tenant, and they'll screen the tenant. They'll ask me my opinion whether or not I approve that tenant, so I still have control over whether or not I approve. They'll get the lease in place, and of course I have to approve that lease, so it's another checkpoint. And then every month they send me a statement, what the balance is paid to me from the income on the property. So you still have like executive powers over the property. It's just that the day-to-day you should really not be involved in, because your sweat equity can't count towards it. And there's really so many other benefits to the self-directed IRA. So that's why I would encourage you to download and how to do it. Download the attachment, the 20 ways an IRA can fund real estate investment, and then call Carl so that you can get more information for yourself. All right. Now we're moving into our announcements to close out our 5-part series. So as usual, Hosts for Hospitals is an organization I'm passionate about, because if you're like most of my clients, you have a generous heart and you want to give, of what you have. And if you don't have the money, but you do have an extra bedroom and you're within 45 minutes of Center City, they would love for you to host people who are visiting our area to visit the hospitals. So that way they're not incurring, let's say, a $1,400 hotel bill. It's only $140 because of the generosity of the hosts who are participating in the program. All right, so this is just a series schedule, and we're at the last one, as you can see. And a list of our guest speakers throughout is also here. One note is that our lender, he moved to a different company because he actually had to move for family, to be closer to family. So Amy Dolan is our new lender of choice. That's me. And then lastly, of course, the books that I recommend to you to help you on your real estate investment journey alongside with me and these other professionals is The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Hold and Flip, which you can get from kellerinc.com. Thanks for participating, and I hope you have a great day.